Hello, my name is George Chamberlain. I'm with the Center for Responsible Seafood. And I'm here with Dennis Voznesenski at the USSEC Sustainability and Sustainable Agribusiness Forum in Singapore. And Dennis just gave a great talk on the new developments with agriculture, sustainable agriculture in Southeast Asia. So I wonder, Dennis, if you could give us a few highlights.
Yeah, so there's three key takeaways from the presentation. The first one is that the world and the food supply chain is increasingly looking towards farmers to reduce emissions. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone else isn't important. Everyone has an important role to play, but there is a large proportion of the role that farmers are going to have to do. And as the industry, we're going to have to help them get there. The second one is that Southeast Asia, because of its large import dependence for grain, is vulnerable to the associated costs that come with sustainability and try to implement the methods for sustainability for farmers. And the last one is that there's two key opportunities I see for Southeast Asia in terms of how they can benefit, what they can do in a sustainable grains world. And the first one is investing in the technology to create lower emission protein or lower emission calories. And the second one is investing in technology to help farmers both in Southeast Asia and the rest of the world reduce emissions.
Right. So if I understand right, one of the problems with the farmer growing animals is that they're dependent on whatever the carbon emissions are from the grains and oilseeds that they're using, right?
So yeah, of course. So theoretically, if we have a kilo of beef, it takes however many kilos of grain to actually produce a feed. So maybe 12 kilos of feed to produce 1 kilo of beef. Then if you have plant-based meat substitutes, kilo of grain, or maybe a bit more, is equal to a kilo of plant-based meat substitutes. It doesn't equate in terms of nutrients. There are things in meat that you can't get by just using plants, of course. But then you look at cell-based, you look at fermentation-based meat. It's not that it's going to get to an economically viable position in, like, say, maybe 3-5 years. But if we look at 15, 20 years, in the grand scheme of things, not very long, there could be some really significant changes in terms of what type of meat we consume. And also, it'll have a big impact on total feed grain demand, because imagine you don't need that much grain to produce cell-based meat, to produce fermentation-based meat. So there could be some really fundamental changes, in the next 15 to 20 years.
Fascinating, yes, all these new developments. And then going back to the farmer himself who's raising the grains and oilseeds, could you comment on this this sort of new development of carbon farming? And is there, are we getting out of the starting blocks in some parts of the world, or is it just more in the thinking stage?
Yeah, so if we take the example of Australia, there's farmers at different stages of that journey. So if you look at areas where there's more reduced productivity land. So if you look at Western Australia, a large proportion of that land isn't as productive as the East Coast. So those farmers are seeing it economically viable to implement carbon projects. But you go to somewhere like Victoria in Eastern Australia, where the soils are great, the yields are incredible there, it doesn't make economic sense yet, because the price of carbon just isn't high enough to implement those carbon projects. So it makes more sense to grow canola or wheat or barley instead of leaving that area for forest, so growing trees there or putting native vegetation there. So everyone's on that journey, just not at the same level. In Eastern Australia, many farmers are just trying to figure out, how am I going to measure these emissions? How do I know what the emissions of my operations are? That's at the stage where a lot of farmers are.
Fascinating. So the idea that a farmer, instead of releasing carbon emissions, can actually sequester it is the potential, but we have to get the measurement methodology in place to make sure we have the accounting.
Oh, definitely. And not only sequestering carbon, but also maybe using fertilizer more efficiently. And that way, if you don't have to use as much fertilizer per unit of production, then you can reduce the emissions associated with fertilizer use, or pesticide use, or herbicide.
Fascinating. Dennis, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.